Hi, this is Paul. Rationality Rules just dropped another video. The video of the Christ Whisperer, which is what he made after his conversation with Jonathan Peugeot, a video that I found quite disappointing, given the hope that I was having for him. Maybe not so disappointed. I was really happy to hear him take on the question of religion. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't define religion here as much as talks about the adaptive aspect of religion. Now, he begins with greeting us. Well, he begins with something which is I don't know, take of Vikings. The little dialogue between these two characters, I don't know who they are. I first thought that this might be some adaptation of the Brothers Karamazov, because there are aspects of this of Ivan talking to Alosha, but not so sure.
Necessary to have them.
And then, hello, my
fellow apes.
My fellow apes. As someone who I read, hopefully not unfairly, as being an ardent egalitarian, is this the level of equality that he would like to assume for us? That we are apes? I think if we were to meet and I would call him an ape instead of a man, he might be offended, and rightly so. And it brings to mind C.S. Lewis's trousered apes comment in The Abolition of Man. And so I find it a rather peculiar greeting.
I hope you're well.
Thank you. I am. I hope you're well too.
Until now, I haven't publicly expressed a comprehensive account of what I consider religion to be.
Yes, and I'm glad that you're doing it. And what I'm afraid is that this video doesn't do that yet either. Again, he's going to account for religion in a sociological way, but he's not going to define it. And so right away, I think I need to lay my cards on the table and assert that I assume his definition of religion is the rituals, beliefs, propositional beliefs, aspects of human behavior that involve mythology, especially mythological means, especially ones that involve elements of what today we might call the supernatural. That would be my assumption of what his definition of religion is, but he doesn't actually define it as such.
And more importantly, why it exists.
And when he says more importantly, that will in fact be what he spends most of his time talking about now, is an account of religion. Now, he's going to go into a sociological account of religion. Unfortunately, he's not actually going to deal with what I believe for him is the most, he would call, irrational or the most offensive aspects of religion, which are assertions of and appeals to supernatural agency in our regular lives.
But I have made commentary here and there that fits the view of religion being merely a social construct.
Okay, fits religion as being merely a social construct, that in other words, there can be no revelation from outside. All we have is what is here below, that which is under the sun. And so these ideas, beliefs, behaviors, rituals arise because of some adaptive advantage that they afford certain groups in their competition with other groups.
Created to control the masses and provide hope and order in a chaotic world.
Created to control the masses and provide hope and order. Let me hear that again, just so I have it right.
Social construct. Created to control the masses and provide hope and order in a chaotic world.
Control the masses. I would assert that, number one, most people who are religious, especially in secular society, do not embrace their religion in order to control the masses. maybe the second argument, to have order in a chaotic world, to have a degree of order, okay, there might be a motivation for an individual today to pursue it. And I would argue that, in fact, this motivation to control the masses in sort of a way assumes that, well, here's a fake story I know will please the people. No. Let's think about Constantine's religious conversion to Christianity. Part of the reason he wanted to embrace a religion was because he believed that the heavens control the earth, and he wanted to be Pontus, which is the bridge between heaven and earth. And for this reason, he was very determined that the Christian priests get their religion right and get their story straight, so that the benefits of heaven could be controlled for his dominion and his reign on the earth. And so saying that, it's a hermeneutic of suspicion, that, well, this is to control the masses, that's a pretty cynical thing. And I would argue that, well, while that certainly is the case, and I, for one, have seen many politicians make religious noises and play religious games in order to curry favor with a population in a democracy, and that is done both on the right and on the left. For those who actually embrace it, it is much more like their worldview than, okay, I'm feeling unsettled, so I'm going to consciously go out and embrace a story for which I don't have enough evidence so that I'll feel comfort by it. I would assert that provides comfort for no one. In other words, right from the start, his view of religion just doesn't jive with my experience of religious people. And again, I'm a pastor, so I have a lot of religious experience with religious people, including being one. And this, in fact, is going to continue to be a problem.
There's not a lot of data on just how many people hold this view. I mean, why would there be? But judging by what little evidence we do have.
So there's not a lot of data, but judging from whatever little evidence we have,
this view is not only the most commonly held among the irreligious, but also the religious.
This view is the most commonly held among the irreligious, yeah, okay. But among the religious? Do people go to church because they think it's good for the government or good for the UK's ability to compete with Nigeria? 5 times more Anglicans in Nigeria than the UK. I don't think they're going to church for this sociological reason. I think they're going to church for personal reasons. I think they really do believe, as I do, that Jesus hears their prayers. I think they really do believe that going to church makes a difference in their life, and not just in sort of in a second order way, but in a very direct way. I think there are some people out there who might be going to church with someone else because they think it's good for other people. But if you're deep into it, you're going to it because you're deep into it and you believe it. And so, whereas, and what's sort of funny about this is that Rationality Rules and Adam Friended have had a sort of antagonistic relationship. Because, well, Adam Friended was, during the Jordan Peterson, the heyday of the Jordan Peterson wave, Adam was running one of the most popular Jordan Peterson clip and commentary channels that there was on YouTube. And Adam Friended, in fact, and he'll tell you this right out, he is an atheist, but he's not an anti-theist. And so, in fact, this position is held by Adam Friended. And so, in some ways, hearing Rationality Rules adopt this position and say it like it did is sort of a wave of surrender to Adam's position, quite frankly. So, very interesting. But to think that religious people hold it for this reason, I don't think you would categorize them, even given your definition of what religion would be, as religious people. Religious people do these things because they inhabit a world in which The sacrament is the body of Christ, in which, so that's a Roman Catholic position, in which the communion of the saints within the church are the body of Christ. And it's for that reason that they share their money with the poor. It's for that reason that they don't give up the habit of meeting together. It's for that reason that they pray for their child who is sick, because they really want and believe Jesus to cure their child. From inside religion, again, listen to what he said.
We data on just how many people hold this view. I mean, why would there be?
Yeah, why would there be? Because it doesn't frankly matter that much, because religious people are religious for their own reasons.
But judging by what little evidence we do have,
I'd love to know where this evidence is coming from.
this view is not only the most commonly held among the irreligious.
I don't know that to be the case, because I think he's following Jordan Peterson's breadcrumbs. I think Rationality Rules is on the slippery slope towards Jordan Peterson sort of Christianity. And the more videos he makes and the more attention he pays to Jordan Peterson and the more he continues to think through these things in order to make these videos, I think he's going to keep going down this trajectory. He's already, if we have Jordan Peterson over here, say Jonathan Peugeot over here, and Adam Friended over here, he's already in Adam Friended territory, although he probably won't admit it because that sort of means a big, piece of humble pie, or maybe even a little bit of crow.
But also the religious.
No, because almost by definition, the religious are not playing a sociological game. They are believing it from the inside. And the more religious someone is, the more they are believing it from the inside. And that's the way worldviews are. We believe them naively. These are our beliefs. They really believe in God. And maybe it's for this reason that he had his crying game moment with Jonathan Peugeot, because, of course, only a tiny slice of religious people actually believe. Now, maybe in the UK, where you have a dying state church, but I really don't believe that's the case, because religious people do religious things that makes demands on their hearts and lives, and they do those things.
The Christian, for instance, tends to think of other religions as at best as a corruption of their own, and at worst as a social construct born of ideological ambition.
No. Christians don't think of other religions as corruptions of their own. They might think of, I don't think most Christians think of Islam as a corruption of their own religion. Islamists think of Christianity and Judaism as preliminary steps on the way to their religion, as do Mormons. Most people think about other religions as just plain wrong, sort of the way Rationality Rules thinks about Christianity. That's a better idea. Now, there are a small number of people that will take a step back and take a secondary look at religion and note the social dynamics that religion tends to play. And this, of course, is what Durkheim did. But there are many other sorts of religious type things that are operating out there without supernaturalism or anything like that, one of which is nationalism. And what's interesting is that this is a subject of the Queen who is making these arguments, because in a sense, you've got the whole machinery running for you. In the UK, you have God and state working together in sync. You have a state church, and the head of your church is the head of your state. So again, he's talking fast and these things are slipping by, but no, I don't think there's actually any evidence for any of this. Yes, there's sociology of religion. Yes, I believe it. Yes, I think that functions. But as a Christian, I tend to think that, well, I think Christianity is true. And Islam maybe, because I know a little bit about Islam. If you read Tom Holland's In the Shadow of the Sword, but in many cases, religions, especially religions that are sort of connected with other religions, often seem to be temporary outgrowths that grab some that grab some sociological understanding and really go off, but the people on the inside of it really believe it. And I think it's true whether you're flying an airplane into skyscrapers shouting Allah Akbar, or in a nationalist if you're defending the home front from invading armies. You believe them from the inside out.
The same, of course, is true of the Muslim, Hindu, Shintoist, and so on. Further still, this is the sociological view of religion. Whilst Weber, Durkheim, and Marx differ in their extended views, they are united in regarding religion as an evolutionary adaptation.
True.
After all, the essence of a social species is social cohesion.
Okay. The essence of the social adjective on a species is social cohesion, and we are indeed a very social species. Unlike most, apes are fairly social, but they can't socialize to the degree that we can, so even then, the ape description of us is, we might as well refer to us as some other species prior to us in the evolutionary scale. Hello, water dwellers. Have you evolved beyond those gills yet? Hello, gill keepers.
And where ants use pheromones and chimpanzees groom, humans have ritual.
Okay, and, well, again, for Team Human here, he's not holding up the side very well. Do you want to join Team Chimp? Do you want to join Team Ant? I'll stay with Team Human.
Thus, the sociologist is typically indifferent to supernatural claims.
Yes, because what the sociologist does when he is trying to be a scientist is he attempts to shut off the manifest image and look through the world through a scientific lens. And as I've said before, that's sort of an outbreak. Well, we go into the lab, and this is how we work in the lab. When we are trying to uncover what's going on in COVID, we eliminate God and other beings and agents out there, and we just say, I'm going to look at what the virus does on its own. C.S. Lewis, Miracles, Physis, Nature, Natura. That's what we're talking about. And but you can't go through life like this. So yes, the sociology sort of covers one eye and says, I'm going to try to look at this as not the will of an agent, but as something which goes on its own. That's the scientific image.
It is of little consequence if Jesus resurrected, Muhammad split the moon, or Thor defeated the frost giant.
For a sociologist at that moment, but not in general. And not with the person within the religion who is praying to have their son or daughter healed.
So long as the belief offers the tribe utility, it's done its job.
Okay, and again, true. As a Christian, I am deep within the religious perspective. I pray for people, and maybe I should start praying for... It's so funny when you get into this, because would you like me to pray for you? No. I've had people tell me that. Shall I pray for you? No, don't pray for me. Shall I send you good wishes? Is that better for you than praying for you? Well, because it doesn't involve, okay. But again, for a religious person, no, all these things do matter. And the point taken for sociology, if you cover one eye, you're saying, okay, how well does this religion afford the cooperation that enhances the competition between other religious tribes? Now, in the real world, it's way more complex than that. But if you're seeing the world through already a lens of competition, this is the game that you're playing.
In a nutshell, my view of religion is a more reductionist take than the aforementioned, placing additional emphasis on the evolutionary roots.
I don't know why he means that's more reductionistic.
And it's fair to say that Carl Jung and Jordan Peterson have partially inspired my perspective.
Breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs. I can't listen to this guy and think I've talked to hundreds like you, my friend. Maybe they don't have YouTube channels. Maybe they don't have status. Maybe your status is going to keep you from sliding down that breadcrumb slippery slope towards starting to, because Jordan Peterson was right. We look out for what's useful, and hey, once you get a little taste of leading people via your YouTube channel, maybe you'll discover that being a preacher or a prophet or a guru is good business. I mean, you said it yourself. Is that the religion that you're looking for?
Because of this, where many see delusion worthy of nothing more than disdain, I see potential treasure worthy of both disdain and respect.
Okay, and see, this is some of the movement that I was talking about, him reaching out and talking to Jonathan Peugeot, and so, all right. So again, I think he's following the breadcrumb trail, and he's much more in Adam Friended's camp, and that is movement. As far now, he might deny that, but I'm just watching. Okay, I'm just watching.
What's more, I found that the theory that I subscribe to simply makes better sense of religion.
Again, it won't account for why individuals believe, as well as it will account for maybe, if you take a materialist, naturalist perspective, why religions emerge. But it won't account for the most egregious aspect of religion, the most egregious for you as a modernist, who would say that, well, we would imagine that nationalisms, because they don't necessarily involve supernaturalist elements, nationalism should be rampantly displacing religions. Why can't you dress up the queen and have her do rituals? Because you would think that all the supernatural stuff must not have, certainly that must be of losing utility. Because if you say that the supernatural stuff is more useful than, let's say, nationalism as religion that doesn't necessarily involve supernatural elements, well, what are you suggesting then? I see in this video, not only is he following the breadcrumbs down the slippery slope, he's undoing his own channel.
And because it acknowledges the intuitions of adherents but rejects their interpretation, it offers a unique middle ground.
Again, he's back in Adam Friended land.
Anyhow, let's begin at a surface level and build up from there.
Now, I can only imagine that cutting to a pack of wolves, perhaps, hunting buffalo is a surface level, but he's not going to talk about buffaloes or wolves at all. And this is part of the problem with his approach with Jonathan Peugeot, that he simply assumes that evolution is an obvious thing. And if it were more obvious than religion, why don't we uncover 10,000-year-old texts that talk about evolution? It's not obvious at all. In fact, well, more bison and wolves.
Life in the state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. These are the words that Thomas Hobbes used to describe our natural nomadic circumstances.
And he only comes up with this saying when we seem to be quite a ways away from natural nomadism, which is itself an interesting thing. But again, he's sort of following Jordan Peterson's script that life is suffering.
And whilst we've escaped many of the binds of nature, one shackle will forever remain. We suffer, and then we die. Yes, if we're lucky, as the vast majority of us alive today are, we'll experience a lot of joy and happiness along the way.
And also what we have are some utilitarian ideas. And the next thing, not only his inability to understand and account for individual religious people, unless they're just dupes of other code going on under the surface, is what are the values here that we are going to use? And this is where, Sevilla King's channel, where she's using a metaphysics of value, just begins to lay waste to this whole conceptualization.
but no matter our path, all roads lead to the lonesome city of demise.
All roads lead to the lonesome city of demise. Grim.
I'd argue that this is the most inconvenient truth of our existence. As Christopher Hitchens put it, evolution has meant that our prefrontal lobes are too small and our adrenal glands too big, and thus our irrelevance in the universe.
Now, what's interesting about that line is, too big for what? Are our adrenal glands too big? Aren't these big adrenal glands what we can account for all of the motivation of building civilization? I think our adrenal glands are actually smaller than our frontal lobes. What kind of person would he have us be? And again, suddenly we introduce value, and as I said, he's following the breadcrumbs here, and so he's actually going to inherit all of the liabilities of Bret Weinstein's, as Sam Adams in the Discord server called him out to be, kind of a Gnostic, that what deficient God produced this unhappy state of affairs where our prefrontal lobes are too small and our adrenal glands are too large. I thought the problem with us was that we don't have claws. We got these little things called fingernails, and our skin is so sensitive, and our women can produce year round. And why don't we have, if nature is red in tooth and claw, and it is, as Thomas Hobbes notes it to be, we seem tremendously ill-equipped for nature, but here, lo and behold, we find ourselves at the top of the heap. Well, what is he saying about this? I thought part of the problem for us in the naturalistic conception was that, well, the one most inconvenient truth about us is that we die. If our prefrontal lobes were small and our adrenal glands were larger and we had tougher skin and sharper teeth, then maybe we would be happier, like all of the apes, none of whom in whatever jungle they're living in are anxious about their future, while we, in fact, all are. So this is a very peculiar set of situations that we as a species find ourselves on the top of the heap, only to be dissatisfied about it because of the size of our brains, that we know we are going to die, whereas my little dog who lives in my house will quite likely die before I will, and yet is not anxious about that death at all, whereas my children who love my little dog are anxious about my little dog's death. So this is a very strange thing to say, given what you've said already. Perhaps if the goal, now we're back in value land, if the goal of all of us was to be less anxious and to enjoy life more, maybe we would be better being that alligator in the alligator farm who is sitting in the warm tank and just loves having chicken thrown at him. And I remember being in that alligator farm and asking, what about those gators? And the guy says, these gators are really dumb. Just give them some chicken and they're happy. Would we be better off being that? Having no prefrontal lobes and having all adrenal glands? Because, well, what is the better you are shooting at, really? Is it eternal conscious bliss? Is it just as much conscious bliss as possible? And this goes back to my last Rationality Rules commentary video, where it would seem that the reasonable thing to do would be a big shot of cocaine with a bullet chaser, because then our life would be maximally happy. But I just watched a video on what's going on in Seattle by a local Seattle ABC affiliate, which shows people that are high on drugs on the street. And what about us makes us think that being high on drugs is a problem beyond the fact that we come down? So this is way more complex than you're letting on.
Frontal lobes are too small and our adrenal glands too big, and thus our irrelevance in the universe is so inconvenient, so at odds with our ego, so at odds with our evolution even, that in the absence of courageous skepticism we are perfectly primed to embrace comforting lies.
I don't see how your courageous skepticism actually addresses the issue at all. Your courageous skepticism is in fact the religion that you just dismissed from others, except it has no supernatural content. The best you have is, I'm going to have a thought that's going to say, well, it's really an appeal to pride. I will be proud that I can be more miserable and stoic than anyone else. Well, bully for you. Does that afford your group an advantage? Well, how exactly do you count your group? You don't have all of these rituals around it. Well, maybe I find that in order for me to buoy my agnosticism or my atheism and my pride against it, we should all be together and say, so say we all. And so then we try to establish an atheist church, which time after time, again and again, never seems to get any traction to the degree that it can rival all of these people believing in stories about things that the other religious people don't believe in. So again, the inside view seems to be what is absolutely necessary to provide the outcome, and the best you can do is afford an inside church, but your frontal lobes are not the problem. Or are they?
It's this rather disgusting credulity that urged Twain to write that religion was invented when the first con man met the first fool.
Again, this is a real problem of the inside outsider. The only reason the fool gets taken by the con man is because the con man doesn't believe. That's what you mean by a con man. That someone is cynical. This Twain quote assumes a cynical atheist, whereas that's not going to account for the rise of religion at all, according to the sociological perspective.
To get at the heart of the matter, let's switch down a gear.
Which is exactly where we haven't got at all. We haven't got to the heart of any matter.
We deeply desire to be part of something far greater than ourselves.
Yes, we do.
To know that we are, at the very least, a pawn in the cosmic game at play.
True.
And religion offers this promise in abundance.
There's something very interesting about this move, because you can make this move now, but can you really make this move in the 15th century? Can you really make this move in the 10th century, where where in fact religion is quite a bit more pervasive? In other words, and this again is a critique of Freud that has been made by many, the religion that you might imagine to be self-centered and work for myself is in fact a lot of what deconstructed people run around with today. The real religion that has built civilization and afforded cooperation and competition, in fact, tends to be, well, you're in danger of the fires of hell. And so, the Weber, he mentioned Weber, the Weber thesis that Calvinists work like crazy because even though they have a doctrinal system that says you can't earn your way into heaven in sort of a second tier way, you're anxious about your inability to earn your way into heaven. And so you do this other work in order to achieve the fruits of assurance of salvation. So this is not an account of anything except wishful thinking. And wishful thinking alone is insufficient to afford a nationalism, much less a self-sacrificial religion.
You're not just an important part of the universe. No, you're the creator's favorite toy.
This is narcissism. And if you were to say, well, I don't know, Roman Catholicism in the 16th century, is it narcissistic? In fact, a usual critique we get from the celebrity atheist is that, okay, it's derived by some con man and they're conning all these people, and all these poor beleaguered religious slaves are trying to obey the God in order to save their souls. He basically said a version of that, and now he's saying, no, this other is narcissism is the root of religion. Narcissism is the root of a lot of religious activity for a lot of people who have sloughed off the traditional religions.
The pinnacle of all creation. Indeed, both Abraham...
Well, I guess he doesn't believe humanity is the pinnacle of all creation because he keeps calling us apes.
Abrahamic and Eastern religions elevate us far above our mammalian kin.
I would assert that, in fact, we've seen the rise of atheisms of various stripes by virtue of the fact that we have been relatively successful in affording ourselves well-being, good economics, sanitation, good health care, that has elevated our view of ourselves to the point that we say we no longer need religion because we say to God, we can do it ourselves. Thank you very much. Current pandemic notwithstanding.
The former by God's will and the latter by transmigration. In either case, you are special. Yes, you might be suffering here on earth, but smile, sweet child, and wipe away your tears, for this life is but a test for the next, in which you'll be unimaginably rewarded for your faith.
Or you'd better work hard for the religious con man, or you're not going to make the cut to get yourself into heaven. Again, I don't know where his data on religious people is, or even, now don't come to me and tell me that religious people are in hopeless bondage about, the two issues that he brought up with Jonathan Peugeot about abortion or homosexuality. Because basically, by his definition now, the gay people are being religious and reordering their religion because it serves them and they want to be gay. I mean, this is not a coherent critique, and it just doesn't hold.
You'll be given all the riches of the most wildest dreams, and justice will be enacted on those that have wronged you. They'll burn in sulphur or come back as a slug.
And now if you look at, let's pull this book and say, okay, you want to look at data? You want to look at data of religion? Well, it might come as a surprise to many of you, but religions study themselves exhaustively, especially in the secularized West. And so, let's see if the camera will focus on this. There we go. Soul Searching by Christian Smith. Huge study that Christian Smith did in the 1990s on the religious assumptions of American teenagers. And what he came out with is moralistic therapeutic deism. And what does that mean? Well, that sort of looks like the religion that Stephen just described. But that isn't any of the religions that these people have sort of migrated out of. And if any of those young people stay in religions, they're going to find far crunchier elements of religion than sort of the slap-happy religion that has developed in the West right now. In other words, he's critiquing moralistic therapeutic deism fundamentally.
What more could you possibly hope for? Yeah, it's a little suspiciously convenient.
And the moralistic therapeutic deists, for one thing that many have noted them on to be, is deficient in hell. Good people go to heaven. You say, well, what about the bad people? Well, people are good. Oh, okay, people are good. All right. And so what happens to these good? Well, there's a few bad ones. Oh, like who? Like Hitler and Mao and Stalin and my neighbor that lets their dog do its business on my lawn and won't pick it up. Those people go to hell. Oh, okay. But most people today in the affluent West don't believe in any hell at all.
Isn't it? Further still, religion offers great psychological utility. As the ex-Muslim Hassan Radwan puts it, being part of a group that has billions of subscribers that share beliefs and experiences gives you a sense of identity, comfort, security, and community.
True.
You don't feel you are struggling alone in a vast universe. You can have hope that God will look after you. Human lives are littered with tragedies that cannot be prevented nor predicted. Religion provides a blanket to wrap oneself in when tragedy strikes. It promises that you will be compensated in an afterlife.
True.
Your life and sufferings, no matter how trivial, are seen, noted, and acknowledged.
True.
Again, Twain's harsh words come to mind, but perhaps more fitting is the following from Marx. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions.
Now, what's interesting about all of these critiques, Hobbes, without Hobbes, Karl Marx, Mark Twain, Christopher Hitchens, I don't know who the last Islamic guy seemed to be the most on tune. All of these others aren't religious people. And so only a secularist would have this kind of critique. And so I'm wondering about your evidence.
It is the opium of the people. So religion offers social cohesion by establishing authority and quenching existential anxiety, but as said earlier, in certain circumstances it has imperative utility. I'll now give just two examples.
Okay, and now you're kind of making the case here.
You only think.
Oh no, we're not gonna.
I know you.
Let's see.
I'm having a revelation. None of us will perish in combat. It's a form of heaven reserved for only half of warriors who fall in combat. More still, it's regarded as the greatest privilege, and sophisticatedly argue that death in combat is not to be taken literally as the New Age atheists like Sam Harris do, but rather it's to be taken as a metaphor. Yeah, I'm having a revelation. Just as Yahweh told the Pope that limbo is no longer a thing, Odin's telling me that Valhalla is for the intelligent. I mean, he gave his eye for wisdom, not for strength. Those who dedicate their lives to intellectually fighting for the Aesir will find themselves at Odin's table, as they died in intellectual combat against the evil forces that be.
Now, what he's making the case for is that religions update themselves according to the present circumstances. And I would say, yeah, that's right. But a little bit later, he's basically going to say the real problem with religion is dogma. They don't update themselves. And it's like, well, which is it? Do they update themselves or don't they update themselves? Do they update themselves along the lines of, well, conditions have changed, and so it's no longer the warrior who earns his way into heaven. It's the faithful member of the community who self-sacrificially gives themselves for the welfare of their neighbor along the lines of love. Now, what's ironic is that it's exactly this kind of thing that he would look at and say, yeah, I want my neighbors doing that. Which leads us again to the question of value. Well, where do you get your value system from? How are you critiquing these value systems? Now, you might look at Valhalla and say, that's not a very good one, but you've basically updated it along with all of the other Christians around. Before I play this other thing, I want one word to be on your mind: tautology.
The reason we see Valhalla as a bizarre belief is simply because we judge it from our perspective.
The reason we see Valhalla as a bizarre belief is because we judge it from our perspective. What has formed our perspective? I think I hear Tom Holland knocking. I think he wrote a book. I think another member of the United Kingdom stopped and asked, where have my values come from?
If instead we judge it by the environment in which it emerged, Valhalla.
But we're still judging it from our perspective, even if we're trying to take the environment into account for what's going on.
Religious beliefs are hence not just carrots swung to enforce obedience, but some, at least, are also abstract embodiments of the challenges and environments of those that conjured them.
He's following the Jordan Peterson breadcrumbs!
We could, of course, apply this reductionist approach to any religious or superstitious belief, and
he's still following Jordan Peterson and Jung.
When corroborated with adequate,
at some point he's going to ask himself, is this true of me? Are my beliefs conditioned? Are my beliefs at the end of a long train of sociology and psychology and myth and mythology? And am I? I'm looking at you as if you're a bunch of apes, but am I also a constructed being? And if so, what are the elements of my construction? If only there was a book that asked that question from the perspective of, I don't know, someone who knew a little history.
Anthropological, historical, and psychological evidence, we can potentially discover crucial facts about not only the challenges of our ancestors, but more importantly, who we are as a species.
And so now we're going to wind up with the Brett Weinstein characterization. But it's going to have all the deficiencies of Brett's position, because he's saying, well, we've all been conditioned to believe these, and he hasn't accounted for anything supernatural yet. We're all going to believe in these stories, and history is wise, but now we've come to the point that we no longer need these stories, and we can do better without them. But number one, you haven't accounted for the supernatural stories, which is at the heart of your disagreement, and you really haven't suggested why you can be excluded from all of these dynamics yourself.
And this is especially likely when the same archetypes, motifs, and symbols emerge independently in vastly different cultures. We must, however, and I can't stress this enough, be very careful as to avoid confirmation bias and the naturalistic fallacy.
Why?
If we are looking to justify the utility of a belief, then by vice of our lowly origin, we're going to do so, even when it's not actually justifiable.
Does that apply to you too?
For this reason, we must insist on having additional evidence from strong scientific disciplines.
And who's looking at this evidence? Are they also part of a pattern looking for patterns?
And in regards to the naturalistic fallacy, we can never infer that because something is natural, it follows that it's morally correct, ethically justifiable, or even relevant to the environment of today.
But where do these morals and ethics come from, if not from the environment? And the yardstick that you're using in order to evaluate these moral and ethics, where does that yardstick come from? And we're sort of back, and again, Sam's critique of this, that it must have been a lousy God who made us so dependent on subjugating women and doing all this heinous things in the past. And so now he's going to say, oh, conditions have changed, and now we're in a more cooperative mode instead of a male-dominating patriarchal mode. But how would you know? And how long will that go? And if we enter into another time when, let's say, resources run out, or we degrade the elements of the planet, or another nation arises that is patriarchal indeed, and we discover that, well, in the scheme of things, we can't beat patriarchal societies, which in terms of evolution might be the case that it's making. Therefore, we have to be patriarchal in order to outcompete the other patriarchal societies. But if that is the case, then where do you have your justification for anti-patriarchy? Well, maybe you're just anti-patriarchal because right now the hottest girls are looking for guys who are anti-patriarchal, but that doesn't say anything about the validity of patriarchy or anti-patriarchy. You don't have access to that level. All you're looking at is what will succeed in competition with one another. So maybe someone is going to believe in a sky daddy or a flying spaghetti monster. And if you discover that the sky daddy or the flying spaghetti monster does in fact afford a competitive advantage, then your society that has gotten away with it with all your rationality will lose. And you might argue that if your beliefs are so self-evident, maybe other people in the past had them. Well, let's say maybe the Greeks had them and the Romans ate them for lunch. So where are you? Life is short and brutish and full of suffering. And there you have it. It doesn't give you a knowledge of truth. It doesn't give you a knowledge of anything else. It doesn't say that it's wrong to oppress women. It doesn't afford any of those things. But those are the value yardstick you're using. So you're going to argue that, well, not oppressing women is better for us. How about, then listen to Brett Weinstein, how about subjugating people of other races? Because Brett makes the point that in terms of women, because all of us have women really into our lives, racism is a harder thing to resist with these evolutionary arguments. And Brett Weinstein will go on to say that's a real problem because evolutionarily, we're sort of, we keep women in the game because, well, we like our mommy. And we want our mommy to like us, and we want to appeal to other women. And so that sort of stays in balance. But doing genocide on a competing group, whether that group is religiously identified or racially identified or something else, there's no resistance to that in evolution. In fact, it's to our favor to do so. His perspective on religion, well, again, he has sort of arrived where Adam Friended is, and he's following the Jordan Peterson breadcrumb trail. And I think he's gonna get there. Anyway, I'm out of time for making this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope I was fair. If Steven wants to talk, we can talk. If you know anything about my channel, I'll talk to pretty much anybody. So here we have it.